Our goal is not to occupy Gaza. Our goal is to free Gaza.
It seems to me that the ghouls are lining up around the world, having made a huge amount of money out of selling weapons to Israel, and now lining up to take over the real estate of Gaza.
Since the beginning of the war, Israel has let in close to 2 million tons of aid.
لا أعتقد أن أحد هناك في شمال قطاع غزة لديه كفاية من الطعام.
I've been an eyewitness to multiple war crimes on a daily basis, clear evidence to my mind of genocide. Our government believes the Israeli propaganda that is coming out. So I'm here to give my testimony, my eyewitness accounts of what I believe are barbaric war crimes.
Just to quiet people, just to pretend that the problem is solved, they re-engineered the famine in a different way. It's a continued famine, it hasn't stopped.
The ICC have arrest warrants out for Benjamin Netanyahu, Johan Gallant. So as a signatory to the Rome Statute, it's an obligation on Britain to arrest those individuals if they arrived in our country.
Jeremy, you've compared this Gaza Tribunal to the Chilcot Inquiry. Can you tell me the similarities?
The similarity is that we are investigating British policy and policy making and the situation in Gaza. Chilcot was appointed in 2009, which was long after the Iraq War had started and the worst crimes had been committed. And that was the third inquiry. There was the Butler Inquiry and the Foreign Affairs Select Committee Inquiry, both of which were inadequate. This is obviously an independent inquiry in the sense that it is not supported or sponsored by government in any way. What we've got here is some incredibly powerful testimonies this morning of the conditions in Gaza. And for this afternoon, we're moving on to the legal situation and the legal implications. But anyone listening this morning to Professor Maynard, for example, would just feel devastated at the love he has for his patients and having to operate on children with no anaesthetic and indeed no antiseptic and try and save lives. And he keeps going back and back and back to do that. And so the power this morning was enormous, and a huge number of people following our inquiry online has shown just how important it is to get to the truth of all of this.
I've been going to Gaza since 2010 to teach and to carry out surgery. And I've had 3 trips into Gaza working in the hospitals there since October the 7th, 2023.
Can you talk to me about what has changed, if anything, since October 7th?
Yeah, I mean, I've had 3 trips. I got back a few weeks ago from Nasser Hospital. Each time I go, I imagine it can't be worse than the previous time, but it is indescribably worse every time I go. The 4 weeks I spent at Nasser a few weeks ago were awful. I saw terrible injuries from explosive injuries from bombs. A new thing I experienced was multiple shootings of young teenage boys by Israeli soldiers at the Gaza humanitarian food distribution sites. The malnutrition was awful. I've called this out over a year ago when I was there, but the malnutrition is indescribably worse. I saw newborn babies die of starvation. I saw children die of starvation. I saw adults die of starvation. Many of my patients got terrible infective complications because they were malnourished and died despite all the effort. So the forced starvation by the Israelis is causing thousands of deaths from malnutrition. Gaza's been failed by our government. I and many other healthcare workers have given detailed photographic evidence to senior members of this government and the previous government, and it has been ignored. They need to decide whether they want to believe the multiple witness testimonies from healthcare workers such as me who've got no axe to grind. We've got no political agenda. We're humanitarians. We are telling them as we see it. Or do they want to believe the Israeli propaganda, which is repeatedly being regurgitated by our media, and as I say, for which there is no verifiable or credible evidence? It is unconscionable that our government has not called for a full arms embargo. It is unconscionable that F-35 jets, for which our government is still supplying parts, are bombing those very children who I have had to operate on in Nasser Hospital and Al-Aqsa Hospital. It is unconscionable that they are still flying reconnaissance flights over Gaza, giving military intelligence to facilitate the bombing of Nasser Hospital 2 weeks ago.
The UK, as a signatory to the Rome Statute and the Genocide Convention, has a duty and an obligation. Wherever in the world atrocities are happening, potential genocide is happening, they have a duty to intervene and prevent genocide. Now, we know the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary have denied or refused to acknowledge that a genocide is taking place, despite this week genocide scholars declaring that evidence is there to confirm it's a genocide. But the UK needs to take active steps to prevent genocide. So I hope, and I'm sure the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary don't believe there isn't a risk of genocide. So if they believe that, then they should be taking steps to prevent it. So they have failed to intervene to prevent over 60,000 people being slaughtered, 90% of the whole of Gaza's infrastructure being destroyed, pretty much all hospitals, schools, universities completely flattened. They haven't taken any steps to prevent that. But actually, they've been participating, they've been complicit, and they've been aiding and abetting the genocide. So this inquiry must hold our government to account. The aim is to hold our government to account and to uncover the real truth, because I don't believe parliamentarians or the public have been told what the government has been doing and why.
So you're suggesting that perhaps the UK government is facilitating some of the attacks by the Israelis?
Gathering evidence or data or surveillance flights and sharing it with Israel that they can use to attack areas and perpetrate more crimes, whether it was intended for that purpose or not, is complicity.
My anaesthetist at Nasser was taken from Shifa and detained for a month. He told me that he was held with a bag over his head and his arms tied behind his back. He lost 1.5 stone in weight. He also reported that he was beaten every day.
Italy, Spain, other countries have hosted hundreds of children into their hospitals. The UK refuses completely. So not only is the UK actively killing us, but they refuse to help us. I think it's very important for our testimonials to be documented, because in the past, colonial countries like the UK, like other countries in Europe, like France, have changed history. They didn't write, our voices were not heard. So I think it's very important now that the voices of Palestinians are heard, that the voices of Palestinians from Gaza are centered, and that history is documented right this time.
Are you seeing that revisionism again, like rear its ugly head?
Yes, for sure. I mean, just look at the media in the UK. Just look at the propaganda that's going on. Even the word genocide is not being used when over 100,000 people are getting killed and thousands of children are being targeted. Hospitals are being targeted. Schools are being targeted. So if that is happening and people refuse to use the right terminology, then yes, it's still going on. The propaganda is still going on.
Can you talk to me about getting aid into Gaza at the moment? Can you talk to me about those challenges?
So since March 2nd, 2025, no trucks came into Gaza. And this is what caused the mass starvation, the killing of over 300 people because of malnourishment. And late July, early August, a few trucks were allowed in with very specific ingredients that don't really provide a holistic, nourished diet to people. And they allow only 75 trucks to 85 trucks per day. Some days they don't allow any trucks in. And this is versus 600 trucks per day before the genocide. So it's less than 15% of what people need. And those are not people who are in a quote-unquote normal state. They are people who are malnourished, who are exhausted, who are injured. No medication is coming in at all. It's a re-engineered famine. And this is what we were saying, that The military occupation is doing this on purpose to quiet the international community, because there was some uproar when certain images came out of Gaza. And just to quiet people, just to pretend that the problem is solved, they re-engineered the famine in a different way by letting very few trucks in, by having very specific ingredients come in. So it's a continued famine. It hasn't stopped.
We can't even imagine the fact that we are in 2025 and the stockpiles fall everywhere, and the leftovers that are being thrown in the waste box and bins all across Europe, particularly in Ireland and England, where I've been over the course of the past 4 months. These leftovers that are thrown deliberately all the time by people, and they take for granted they're enough to feed an entire population of 2 million people. We've reached a point where humanity has been failed by the entire globe. And for children, because I have nephews and nieces, and one of them is Ailul, she's 3 years old, and every time I call her, she cries for an egg, and she begs me to bring her an egg, but she couldn't even get it at all. And every time she sees a pen of a watermelon, which represents solidarity with Palestine, she cries for her mother in front of me on a video call asking for a watermelon. That's what Israel has caused.
The journalist who spoke was very, very powerful. He talked about his life as a journalist and trying to tell the truth about what's going on there. My message to journalists is this: there are real journalists out there who risk everything. And there are broadcasting companies who do precious little to support their journalists in Gaza, or simply use independent stringer journalists, so if something terrible happens to them, it's nothing to do with the company that may or may not be buying their information at a later stage. And so my message is, journalists are being specifically targeted by the IDF. A wholly disproportionate number have been killed. It is also a war crime to kill a journalist in a theatre of war with specific intent, and that has clearly been happening.
We've been dehumanized deliberately, so they think we're feigning starvation, we're feigning pain, we're feigning bombs, we're feigning every sort of painful feeling that we have, and then they wouldn't really trust us, so they need an international foreigner to come into Gaza, they need a white man or white woman to get into Gaza and tell them it's a genocide. Look, right now, it's been declared by international human rights associations and different organizations that it is a genocide, but we've told them it's a genocide since the early start of this. If these media outlets had done their jobs and we don't want them to stand with Palestine, but if they were a bit neutral in their reporting, that would have stopped for a very early start. And we have to remind people that there's no objectivity needed in Gaza. There's no neutrality needed in Gaza, because when we're seeing children dismembered, disfigured, and disemboweled on a very daily basis, when we're seeing much of the destruction in Gaza. I've walked in Gaza, like I've come here for 20 minutes. The 20 minutes I spent in Gaza driving or walking, I wouldn't see one intact single left building. And here, look at the number of buildings that are still standing in the beautiful, fussy and fancy buildings all across. So this is what life is about, that those journalists have chosen to be cheap sellouts and will always be shamed, and hopefully one day will be held accountable.
Did you ever feel fearful working as a doctor in the region?
Yes. I mean, it's undoubtedly an extremely dangerous place to work. We were very close to the military activity. The buildings were being bombed, or very close to bombings. We were surrounded by gunfights at times, so it's a very dangerous place to work. But that is overshadowed by the overwhelming need to be there to help our friends. I've been going there for 15 years. Very close friends work there. Many close friends have been killed. So the need to go and help them far outweighs any perception about risks of danger there.
Can I ask you, why are you here today? What's the importance of carrying out this tribunal here?
I've been an eyewitness to multiple war crimes on a daily basis, clear evidence to my mind of genocide. Journalists are banned from Gaza. Our Western media, our government believes the Israeli propaganda that is coming out. So I'm here to give my testimony, my eyewitness accounts of what I believe are barbaric war crimes, clear evidence of genocide, so that we can put pressure on our government to put pressure on the Israeli government to stop, and also, in due course, that those who have been responsible for this, and indeed those who've been complicit in this genocide, are held to account.
Imagine that you are working there under such horrible conditions where you have to multitask, you have a family to take care of and provide them with supplies every single day, you have to fight for them, and you have to work in a tinted makeshift workplace, and that's where I was working all the time, and the drones are above you 100, like all the time, 24/7, and on many multiple occasions I survived multiple Israeli attacks, especially a week before my departure from the Gaza Strip. And at the same time, they have to imagine that they are going through a lot, that they are losing their family members, and we have seen that the families of journalists have been attacked, have been killed, have been murdered by Israel, and I lost my entire cousin's family before, like 1 week before my departure, and then I had to go live on saying that, like, I'm the mourner today, I grieve the loss of my cousin's family, and then in one of the attacks I had to see my cousin killed in front of my eyes and with his son, and after that I had to report on it in live with tears in my eyes, and afterwards I had to go to the graveyard, bury his body, go to the funeral, do the funeral prayers, and come back to another live report. So that's the reality that has happened with me and with everyone. So if they imagine themselves in such a position, what would they do? But instead, what they're doing, they're sitting on the most comfortable sofas and the most extravagant buildings to just type some words to justify the killing of their colleagues, and that's the same. That's the story we've seen with the AP when they dehumanize their own reporter in Gaza who has sacrificed their life for them, and it's with the same with the Reuters, with the Independent here, which is a very, very biased media outlet. The same with almost every media outlet here in this territory, and instead of like standing with them, I can't really wrap my head around the fact that they are justifying the murder of their colleagues. It's the same when the cameraman, who's your colleague at the moment, when you, may God bless you, when you're killed, he will write that your killing is justified and you should have been killed. That is the same that is happening with journalists in Gaza at the moment.